Hey there, everybody. I was asked to do the intro to Endgame, so I'm doing it. This is Endgame, everybody. Hope you enjoy it.
Yay!
Oh, thanks, Arnie.
Thanks, Arnie. And with your awesome avatar. I was laughing because we have these new camera systems, so it's really interesting to watch that happening. But
for those who didn't hear the announcement, we are discussing augmented reality and the future of technology in our world and integrating it into our sensory systems, whether that's visual or audio or however that ends up working out.
Yes, and we have Charlie Fink with us, a guest, and I'm really excited about this. Thanks to Agent for putting this together, and yeah, he kind of connected us, and we looked up some of your background and work and things like that, and talked, and I'm really excited about this because I think we've wanted to talk about augmented reality for a long time, and so you're the perfect person to talk about it with, and. So I guess to start off, I think it'd be cool for you to just kind of let people know what your background is, so they can get a sense of like who you are and things like that.
Sure. Well, I don't look as young as my avatar. I'm not as young as my avatar looks. But I have lived through several decades of disruption, including the beginning of the internet and personal computing, which I saw from the inside. I was an executive at AOL from 1995 until 1999. Yeah. And before that, I worked for Disney for 11 years and ran virtual reality for them and worked on a little movie that was based on my idea called The Lion King. So I like to say I got paid. I got paid at AOL for what I did at Disney. You all want to hear the Lion King story?
Yes.
Sure.
Right, everybody loves this story, so it's a total digression. Okay, so
but
hey, we're just killing time.
That's the norm. That's the norm.
So, I was a junior executive, and I was in charge of coming up with ideas for animated movies and reading old fairy tales and getting animators to pitch ideas, and so we were constantly pitching my boss Jeff Katzenberg animation ideas. So one day I said to him, I think we should do Bambi in Africa. You know how Bambi begins with the great stag on the bluff overlooking the forest where his son is being born? And then the last shot of the movie, the great stag is back up there on the bluff and Bambi steps up next to him and the great stag steps away.
So,
it's a movie about the son replacing the father.
Yeah.
Except instead of with deer in the forest, you're doing it in the Serengeti with lions and anthropomorphic African animals and African music. And so he said, if you can figure out why Bambi eats the other animals, maybe you've got a picture. And so, like 4 years and 500 artists later, out comes The Lion King.
My understanding was that it was a Macbeth adaptation. Or, sorry, not Hamlet. Hamlet.
Well, I mean, there was so much stuff shoveled into this movie at one point or another in its development, including King Lear. But yeah, I mean, the corrupt uncle is right out of Hamlet, of course.
So, So first of all, that's amazing. When I read that, I was like, wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I guess you worked for Disney, and then you worked at AOL, and you saw the internet develop. And how did you become interested in like virtual reality and augmented reality?
Well, as I said, my last act at Disney was running essentially a chain of VR-cades or location-based virtual reality centers. We were using
what year was this?
Simulator-based virtual reality. This was I was on this project 92 to 95.
Okay.
And we opened 32 locations for these VR simulators. So it was called vehicle-based simulation. Right? There was a window inside the vehicle. It was a big, expensive convex mirror. And, you were in polygon-friendly environments like desert planets and the mining canals on Mars.
So it's an entertainment adaptation of what the military was doing, kind of thing, like flight simulators and things like that. With like a kind of okay, cool.
Yes. And ultimately, the company was sold to Microsoft. It was kind of an acqui-hire of Jordan Weissman, who was the original Xbox creative director and the 30-person programming team that was making experiences for the virtual world entertainment centers. And the simulator business was sold to Dave and Buster's, which is an arcade entertainment chain, and they operated the simulators until 2005, which is kind of
Wow.
amazing. And actually, people still operate them today. So if you go to like Gen Con or one of those kind of role-playing game things, sometimes they have them on the truck, sometimes they set them up in the hall, and people wait several hours to do it.
Yeah. Interesting. So that was
Do
like the
this
first.
retro
To do a little
VR thing.
retro BattleTech.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so I guess what made you interested in augmented reality? So that was like the virtual
Well,
reality
okay,
kind
so
of
what?
component.
So that was my virtual reality experience, and then there was this sort of. I left AOL. I started an email marketing company. I ran American Greetings Interactive. I bought Blue Mountain. I bought eGreetings. I took the entire eGreetings category in the early 2000s from free to fee. In fact, the .com division that I set up at American Greetings is still, to this day, the most profitable part of the company. Even though even though it has the lowest revenue, it is the most profitable. Although I think e-greetings are probably, I don't know what's going on with the business today, but I would imagine it's tough going these days.
Is this like greeting cards, like online?
Yeah, this is American
cards?
Greetings. American Greetings and
Okay.
Blue Mountain. You know what Blue Mountain is, right? Everybody knows what Blue Mountain is, right?
Mm-mm. I don't know what Blue Mountain is.
You're not
apologize.
old enough. Never mind.
Okay, sorry.
I'm getting a thumbs down from Fritz the Cat's son over there, so we gotta move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so
so
anyway,
e-commerce stuff, though, right? Or
after I sold my first startup to American Greetings in Cleveland and worked for them as the president of their .com group, I had enough of corporate life, and I started getting back to my first love, which was entertainment. So I became chairman of the New York Musical Festival. I produced over 30 Broadway and off-Broadway musicals. And one day around the end of 2015, I woke up and said, wow, being a producer is actually a pretty shitty job. How did I get myself into this job? And why do I keep doing it? And I couldn't quite figure out what else to do. And I started writing again because, that's the simplest form of media, right? I mean, anybody can write.
Yeah.
And as it happens, I had trained as a writer in college, and I liked to write, and I was a notoriously good memo writer in my corporate career. So I started writing again, and I didn't, I was writing about everything, right? I was writing about social media. I was writing about politics. I was writing about movies. I was writing about e-commerce. But, my voice, there are a lot of people writing about those topics, and I did not have particularly notable insight or permission, as we used to say, to opine on those subjects. I had no authority. But, at the encouragement of several people, I started writing about VR again. And this is at the end of, I guess, 20. It's probably the fall of 2016. And the minute I started writing about VR, everything I wrote started going viral. And 7 weeks later, Forbes called me and asked me to write about VR and AR for them. So VR was my gateway drug to AR.
Okay.
And I got kind of a crash course in AR while writing this book. Number one, I got fantastic contributors, industry experts and thought leaders to contribute chapters. And I learned an awful lot from working with them. I didn't know as much about augmented reality as virtual reality at that time. And then, of course, I had the great fortune of making it was going to be an augmented reality book, but it became much, much more elaborate when I was introduced to this group in LA called Living Pop-Ups, and they decided to animate the entire book
Oh
with
yeah, they made
augmented
your
reality. So there's
AR.
Yeah.
right. So
Integrated.
so
That's
here's
also
how it works, right? You take the paper
No,
book
go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
and you download the app, the free app onto your phone, and you point it at the cover of the book or any of the markers inside of the book, right? There are several different kinds of augmented reality. One of them is called marker-based AR. And so when the computer vision on the camera sees the marker, it places the animation or the augmented reality animation. It was, in this case, dimensional animation, is anchored onto that marker. So it looks
Right.
like, characters are popping up out of the book. And so there's 30 minutes of original animation. They're like little New Yorker skits, if you will,
Yeah,
in the
you
middle
used
of
the
a
perception
very
on, I saw.
yeah, the book
Like
is a
body
serious
tracking and all that
academic
stuff.
book, and the words are really good, and it's interesting, and I'm even more entertaining than I am in person, or in Avatar, I should say.
Well, you're back in
And
Avatar now.
yeah, I guess I should,
Yeah.
I guess I should, perform,
There you
since
Yeah.
go.
I'm on stage.
Well, I
Or
think
be a
it's
walking, talking cartoon.
I think
Right,
it's
exactly.
interesting that you actually went back. You went from producing and you were like, "Why am I doing this?" But then you ended up saying, "I'm going to go to writing." But then when I watched the background of the making of that book, basically it's a whole. You turned a book into an entire production with acting and producers
Right,
and animators.
I
So
know.
it's cool.
I can't
No,
help
but
myself.
yeah, it's.
I
I
can't
mean,
help
I've never.
myself. It's who I am.
Yeah, this book is like, I mean, I've never seen a book that has acting, that has like actors in it. I mean, this is the first time, and you can hold up your phone
Yeah.
to it, and you literally see these
So-
actors emerging from the book. It's really cool.
But I also want to say that there's AR art in the back of the book from an artist named Zenka. And you can go to her website and download her app and hold it up over these wood. She does these old fashioned black and white woodcuts, but when you hold up her app, the woodcuts become animated and color, and it's amazing.
wow.
And then there's also some art from Tamiko Thiel, who was Google's artist in residence, and she does this, thing with scale where she has these still black and white pictures of water lilies, and you hold your phone over the image on the page, and the water lilies become huge. They like fill up the room.
Ooh. So this leads to a question.
So it's sort of a self-generating marker. Yeah.
So your enthusiasm for entertainment and then your enthusiasm for AR leads me to wonder what is the potential of AR for entertainment? Because obviously VR has a lot of entertainment potential, but what about AR?
Well, that is true. We were going to talk about the difference of VR
Yes,
and AR.
The background.
And so I do think that VR's entertainment potential is unlimited. I do think we will have entertainment in AR, but I think it will be a lot. Think of the world of the App Store, and how much in the App Store is entertainment versus how much is functionality.
Sure. Okay.
Right. So there's some apps in the App Store like Pokemon Go that make billions of dollars.
Yeah, but you play those in your spare time.
How much does Facebook make?
In between?
Right.
Yeah.
So it may be that Pokemon Go made $1 billion, but there are hundreds of billions of dollars being made, off of mobile computing, and they're not being made by games.
I think one thing that you mentioned that actually I've also kind of like looked up and researched a little bit is the origins of virtual reality and the concept of immersing yourself in a new environment and how that's not a new concept.
Let's talk about that, because I think it's actually a good segue. Right. It's not it. I mean, let's start. I mean, VR and AR are similar in that, we're wearing head-mounted displays. They're optical displays. They're, we're trying to involve our senses in every possible way. These are computers, computer vision is involved, and there is no doubt that in the next few years we will have interoperable AR and VR devices. However, that does not make AR and VR the same, and only in very rare use cases are they similar.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start with the use cases and what they are and what they're intended to do. And we'll start with VR, okay? Because before there was an internet, I thought VR was the future of entertainment. And now here I'm back 30 years later saying VR is the future of entertainment. But it comes out of a long history that I call man's quest for immersion. Okay, man, we want to suspend our disbelief and believe in and visit other places and other worlds. We want to be immersed. That is a need, a human need.
Yeah,
it started around the campfire. It started with cave paintings. It started with the shadow play of Plato's cave. It, extended into religion and the, beautiful, clean, holy Baroque churches that were in, dirty and dangerous and terribly unjust worlds. And it goes to theater and dark, anything for which we suspend our disbelief. And VR is the ultimate expression of that. So VR is the inheritor of the quest for immersion that has accompanied man, from big hunters and gatherers.
Yeah.
So, but augmentation is a little bit different. And also, I think that we need to think about the word augmentation, right? Because augmentation doesn't necessarily mean computers. We augment ourselves when we pick up a club. We augment ourselves when we use a machine. I mean, man has always had a quest for immersion, and there has been a twin quest for augmentation, for tools, if you will.
For cyborgism.
So, think about the wheel.
Yeah, we talk about transhumanism
right?
eventually,
And how it became the steam engine and the airplane, and all these things are tools to make men better and smarter. And let me give you one great example of augmentation that you never think of in this way, but it's your mobile phone, your mobile computer. You are augmenting yourself, and believe me, as somebody who is in their 50s, it prevents me from having too many senior moments, because I always remember who was that actor and who was that movie, and what side of Canada is Toronto on?
Yeah,
it's an externalized piece of your brain. It's your memory device that you can
that's
refer
exactly
to.
right. So it's only natural that we would want that to be up in our field of view and getting into our hearing and invading our senses, right? There is an inevitable, the inevitable course of history is for first of all, for us to pick our heads up out of our hands. Right now, we time shift between the digital world in our hands and the physical world out here. So, a head-mounted display, among other things, will give us back the world.
Yeah, I want to expand my body, not just narrow it down to a like a little box.
That's right. And so augmented reality represents, and wearable computing to me represents an evolutionary turning point for humans. An evolutionary and I think so. I think it's quite profound, and in many ways, in very different ways than VR is profound.
Well, it's interesting because it's not a sudden evolution, because evolution takes such a long period of time. But I feel like how you're describing it is that this technology that we've developed is tapping.
Let's talk about that though, because
I feel like it's tapping.
Let's talk about how much time it's taken though, right? Mankind lived for 130,000 generations exactly the same way, and then a dozen generations ago, things changed. And look at the change that we've gone through in one generation. And think about where we'll be one generation from now.
Well, yeah, the evolution. I guess I'm referring to the evolution of DNA. Like basically over a period of millions of years, we've evolved to actually value, like you're saying, these tools like augmentation and immersion and things like that. So what's interesting is that what's being developed now, the evolution, and then another sense of evolution of the actual technology is tapping into our DNA and the way that we've evolved to relate to tools that allow us to be immersed in theater and things like that. So it's interesting because this sudden spike, like you're saying, in technology is all of a sudden, and that kind of, to me, is explaining why these technologies are so enticing to us. Like, it's very hard for me to explain to someone why. They're like, virtual reality, it's the same as Skype. Like, why would you go into this setting? And but it's interesting because it's tapping into this thing that we've evolved to value, which is being immersed in another environment and that kind of thing. So I think that's a really interesting kind of I don't know, like kind of a explanation for why it's such a draw for people to continue to be immersed and use the AR and things like that. I also want to get to like.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
we constantly feel a need to fashion our environment, to change our environment to fit us, and like you talk about evolution as a genetic thing, but it really it occurs to every living system, including the technological system, and technology and humanity evolve through and with each other, and that's like our, and so as we shape our world, like shaping the virtual world becomes a part of that.
Yeah.
What was your?
Well, I was going to ask, like, because I think I also want to hear your kind of, and I think Pablo, this is what you were also getting at, like, what like we're talking about augmented reality, but like, what is that? Like, what is exactly, how is that affecting the world that we're going into and things like that?
Right. Well, so there are two kinds of augmented reality, as I said. There's marker-based augmented reality, and then there's geolocation. And geolocation is the more exciting idea to me. And so when I say the world is going to be painted with data, I'm really talking about geolocation, because every person, every place, everything is about to have data painted on it that will be detectable by the computer inside of your camera. In mobile augmented reality, the camera is the interface, not the app. So your camera will detect geolocated content, and based on your filters or your preferences or the apps you have running, will show you where there is invisible content. So, for example, a building could be painted with its directory. A car could be painted with links to and pictures to and videos to everything pertaining to that car. But you have to be running the right app, right? You have to have the right filter. Filters are very fundamental to the idea of augmented reality, right? Because the idea is not to see all the invisible data. The idea is to get the right data as lightly as possible at the exact right time.
So when you say filter,
that is the holy grail, is contextually aware wearable computing.
When you say filter, let me make sure I'm understanding this right. So when I think about what you're describing, I think about an analogy is kind of when I make a Google search for a business, for instance, and a list pops up, and one of those lists is on Google Maps, and one of them is on Facebook, and one of them is on Yelp. And are you saying that like those filters will be like, maybe I'll have the Yelp filter up, or maybe I'll have the Facebook filter up, and that will tell me about that?
Okay. I think so, because otherwise it would be too much data.
Right, you don't want all of the Google results getting right in your face.
Exactly. I mean, let me give you a use case that I really love, and I use it all the time in my writing because it brings up two very interesting things. This is about augmented reality related to facial recognition.
Forgetting people's names.
Okay, so facial recognition is.
Oh, that's a good.
Yeah, nice avatar.
Oh, hello.
Hello, big guy.
You're standing in the middle. Does that mean you have something to say? Are you? You do? Okay. We'll get to you in just a second then. Okay, go ahead and continue.
He just sort of got here, so I would say he needs to stay for a little while before we can get to his question.
So also, that's another thing. If you do have something to say too, you can come to the middle as opposed to using the exclamation point, so we can see that you're like lined up as well.
Yeah, then we can see you better.
If you have any thoughts or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, okay, use case, right? Because it's about facial recognition, it's about privacy. So let's say this would be a great environment if we were in real life for me to say, you know what, LinkedIn, I'd like to know where my LinkedIn connections are in the audience.
If I'm in a crowd or something.
Or at a conference or at work. And maybe a little light will go on right next to your avatar there, and Alexa will whisper your name in my ear. Right? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get your like whole LinkedIn profile superimposed over your image. That won't be useful to me.
But you want to know
all these videos. Right. I mean, it makes more sense for it to whisper it to me so that I can then use it.
Yeah, that's great.
Right?
Mhm.
So I think that's the kind of augmented reality we're going to have. It's not like a science fiction movie where you have a whole heads-up display of shit in your face like you're, the Terminator.
I think
That
that's
is not
scary to
how
me.
augmented reality is going to be.
I think it's scary to me because the amount of control, I think, and this is a question that I have, I guess, that like shifting control, from like corporations having control over what you are seeing and like that, and then relying on like LinkedIn,
Well,
for example.
let me finish that thought because I see where you're
Okay.
going, but I didn't
And then we'll get
exactly
to you,
finish
Alboy,
my
after
thought.
that.
But in order for LinkedIn to detect you for me, you have to make yourself detectable.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully that's
right. In the same way
happening,
you say,
I'm
I'm going
in.
into the conference, I'll turn on LinkedIn so I can see other people and other people can see me. But when you leave, you'll turn it off because it's not necessary. It's not contextual. It's not information that you want.
Yeah.
And
so
of course, you want to control your
that's...
privacy. You don't want to be detected all the time. There was a science fiction book that somebody was just telling me about where people wear masks so that they can't be.
Yeah, I mean, this changes the whole way we've evolved. Like if you're in a room and you're interacting with people in a way that they're able to like decide if you're gonna know who they are and things like that. It's interesting because that does change the we've evolved in a context where we've evolved, like our whole visual perception system, our cognitive system of identifying objects, all of that has evolved with our amygdala and things like that to identify friend or foe and things like that. So it's really interesting that the technology will all of a sudden augment that system and provide the code. I mean, this is a theme, I think, of our show, that like code all of a sudden has this enormous power over these kinds of systems that we're used to, that have evolved over like millions of years.
And not just code, but money, right? And then my question is about the monetization of this, because you talk about being able to select what we see and what we don't see, but with a bunch of technologies that everyone wants to use, like for example Facebook or Google, like the model is to show you ads that you might not necessarily choose to see. What do you think is the likely scenario there?
I think the likely scenario, I mean, the first thing that's going to happen with mobile AR is it's going to take apps that we're using every day and make them better, right? So 5 years from now, we won't even be saying the word augmented reality. It'll sound like saying the World Wide Web.
Okay.
So augmented reality is going to become invisible very quickly. And its first and perhaps most dramatic expression is going to be the way it changes apps like Google Maps that we use every day, the way it changes Facebook, and the way it'll change Snapchat. So, those are the places where it's going to be the most visible at first, but then it's going to kind of disappear and just become like, oh, that's the way that's the way Google Maps work.
Right. Okay. That's just the app.
So you're saying, well, what's going to happen to advertising? Well, it's going to be the exact same advertising model there is now. It's just that the app's going to have enabled by augmented reality.
That seems much more intrusive.
I think this is. I want to get to Owlboy.
No rush.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, Owlboy. You've been very patient.
Hello. Yeah. Hey.
So the example of being able to do facial recognition with augmented reality is probably the most popular example of things that people like to discuss and bring up about it. And it's also, it's for good reason, because that's really useful, but it's also probably the creepiest thing you can bring up about it, because you were just talking about being able to turn off having people detect you because you're done with the conference. I can already, I work in a university setting and I work with faculty all the time. And sometimes they send me a profile picture and I'm like, this is really bad. So I do it with a reverse image search on Google, and I can find, this is their profile on their university website. It's got their name and their contact info. And now I can get a higher resolution image of the image. Anyway, that's a great example of how, if you've already got your face up there somewhere on the internet, anywhere associated with your name, this stuff is just going to be able to find it. And
that's true.
It might not happen right
true.
away. It might be a thing where like Facebook or LinkedIn is set up in a way where, they've got the technology and the computer power to actually make this work at first. But over time, that'll become a thing that like, oh, there's these open source tools that just scour the web and public
I think you're right
information.
about that, actually. I think that's a really good point.
That's going to be the thing that's going to be the weirdest thing about it, because I don't know. I'm walking down the street and I think you're really cute, and I do my reverse image search on your face and I know your name now. And that's the creepiest thing.
If Google lets you, if Google, and this is if Google lets you do it.
Well,
right?
that's the thing, is you don't necessarily need.
Yeah,
well,
but what Owlboy is saying is that this technology is going to be out there.
Yeah, eventually stuff is going to get to the point where it doesn't have to be Google or Facebook that is the arbiter of having reverse image search and facial recognition.
All you have to do is get a facial recognition, a machine learning system, and then a catalog of images.
Well, so Owlboy, then the science fiction novel that I was just talking about, where people wore masks so that they couldn't be detected, may actually be likely to come true.
It's very interesting. So anyway, I'm totally down with the idea of being able to. I love the idea of having a heads-up display for like navigation and stuff, and I like the idea of being able to look at a flower and like know that, oh, that's a certain kind of flower, and it's really awesome that you're seeing that flower right now because it rarely blooms, or some other kind of information, like all kinds of little factoids about stuff. But
you know, again, that's where filters come in, right? Because you would be saying to your filter, I'm interested in flowers. So when it sees a flower, it knows to append information to it.
Yeah.
But that's and my biggest concern with the information connection with these kinds of things is that, like, for Google, for example, if you Google something, a concept, like a controversial concept, the results that are shown really help to frame your perception of that topic. And so, like, if the flower that you're talking about, Owlboy, is like endangered, for example, and it's like pollution, and some company is polluting a river, and they're are you going to see that information that someone has decided is connected to the flower? You won't have as much. There's going to be a lot of. I think as the technology integration increases, corporations will have more control over this.
I think what you're getting at is a very interesting idea, right? Which is you're just saying, what's the UI? What does it look like?
Yeah.
Right? Because we all know what the UI is on a website. We know what the desktop looks like, but we don't yet know what the UI is for the visual world.
Right.
And we're about to find that out, which is pretty amazing when you think about
it. The database, and something you mentioned when we talked earlier, and Catapult, we'll get to you in a second too, is that is this idea that this kind of broad universal kind of set of data, and then it depends on the interface you're using in terms of what data is drawn up and that you're seeing.
Right.
Like a
Well,
filter
that's what you're talking about. There is a slightly different topic, which is what is the stack of technology needed for you to have AR glasses? Right, because that involves much more than the stack of technology that would just be in the mobile phone or for mobile AR.
So
because
stuff that would be in the cloud.
Yes.
Okay.
But anyway, let's get to this next question. But I want to talk about the technology stack, because that's a really big idea.
Yeah.
My concern is pretty much the same thing that cell phones don't have, is a safety feature. So you're walking with your AR headset. It's got cameras, it's got sensors. Will it be able to detect traffic coming up? Because nowadays people just walk out in the middle of traffic because they got their heads in their cell phones. They're not paying attention to their surroundings, and a lot of people get hit.
This actually would be a great app for mobile phones. Screw head-mounted displays. This is a great idea for mobile phones. Actually, head-mounted displays will make those kinds of collisions less likely because you're looking up and out. You're not looking down and up. So,
but
a
lot of people will walk out and not even look to the sides.
But many more people being killed in New York by taxis because of this, and a lot of people who are dying by texting.
An AR headset would have the computing power to actually be able to sense your surroundings,
probably
kind of thing. So this way here, on screen, you could actually get a stop sign, or it would go opaque red. So that way there, stop walking. You're about to get hit, or you're about to run into something. Kind of thing, because your peripheral vision might not be that great. Oh, I agree. I wish they did, because I don't know how many times I've come close to hitting somebody that wasn't paying attention.
There you go.
That was my point anyway.
Yeah, no, that's important, and that comes at
yeah,
and that comes back. I think that comes back to the data, the input of data, like what data, what layers of data are going into what is being projected into the world in terms of augmented reality.
Well, I mean, let's talk about for a second what you would how an augmented reality headset would work, right? You would need computer vision, right? You need a camera that sees, and in seeing it would have to identify, right? There's a chair, there's a post, there's an avatar, there's a door, there's somebody running.
On your phone, or is that in the cloud too?
No, this is happening locally in your phone. That's computer vision.
Okay.
But that's labeling. Labeling and knowing are different.
Sure.
Right. So that's one layer, is the computer vision layer. The other layer is the browser layer.
Okay.
Right. If the world is going to be painted with data, there needs to be standards. Right. The internet would not exist without HTML. When Google crawls the internet, or when you click on a link, it's because of HTML.
Yeah.
So there needs to be an HTML for the real world. And the objects that the camera sees need to be clickable. And then there needs to be an interface for the browser. Right? So how do we know what's clickable, and how do we know where it takes us? Right? So all of these things have to be built into the graphical interface of this new universal visual browser.
Okay.
Right? Because what the universal visual browser is doing is it's gluing the real world and the virtual world together.
And is this a browser
and so
like...
in that layer, you would put a filter.
Okay.
So that when the camera detects data that's irrelevant to you, you never see it.
And so it's the filter that decides what's clickable and what's not? Hello there.
Hello.
Oh.
Hey, do you want to step down there?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so is it the filter that decides what's clickable and what's not, and then it's the browser that implements that clickability?
I think the filter is between the computer vision and the browser. Right? Because you don't want your browser to see things that are irrelevant to you. Let's picture a world where Facebook does geolocation. So every location in the physical world is covered with notes.
Okay.
You only want to see the notes your friends left. You don't want to see the notes that every asshole on Facebook ever left.
Definitely.
Right. But at the beginning, for example, there might not be any notes in places. So you may want to go into a restaurant and see all the notes that are there.
Well, this is like VR chat. How VR chat is developed is that random, at first it was 15 people, in a room meeting up on Sundays. And then now it's developed into like, you don't even want to go into public rooms because it's like all Knuckles avatars running around. Although you still can find really good content.
So maybe that's an inevitability anywhere.
Yeah, it's just a social system development.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna. The world is going to be crapped up with a lot of advertising and irrelevant shit that you don't want to see, and you're going to need a system of filters to get them out of your news feed or your, in terms of search, it's a different kind of search, right? Because you're searching what's there, so Google is sort of what's not there. You want to search for what's there.
Well, also you're picking up, I think it's an interesting connection to the newsfeed, because the newsfeed is a different situation where you've connected the idea that there's lots of content being produced that you have to filter. It's a little bit different of a context than the augmented reality layer, but it's the same as that it gives the company a huge amount of power, because all of a sudden they get to choose what's being promoted and shown. And I think that there's a lot of ability, to, I think, and manipulate, and this is from a psychological perspective.
I know that there's a big concern right now about the man and having open systems that are not, that don't carry institutional prejudices with them. Sure. But I think we also need to be practical and say, but we want these filters to be built. We just want to control them. We just want to know
accountable
how they work.
algorithms. Yeah.
Right, but yes, I mean, obviously, we want filters to be built without bias, so that you don't filter out information from Chinese people, or information from French people, or information from people who are a different religion than you.
Yeah.
Right. So all of those biases have to be, hopefully the filters will be developed without regard to those kinds of bias.
But they're going to be developed for profit.
No.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, exactly. They're going to be developed for profit. I mean, there's going to be.
I mean, some asshole is going to develop a thing that's like, "Don't show me Jewish people."
This seems like a place that the open source community could step in and like help develop things.
I hope so. There is a movement called what's it called? The AR Cloud Foundation that's trying to find an open source language for the geo location of data.
That's another issue that we kind of touched on earlier, is that like Snapchat. Well, first of all, Snapchat has their own set of geo tag things, and then Facebook has it, and there's all these systems. But you've talked about this. What do you call it? The open web. This layer browser, this universal augmented reality browser,
universal visual browser. Yeah, there needs to be a standard for it all to connect.
Interesting.
Right, because if there are 20 different browsers, you still want them capable of detecting the same content.
But the browser isn't where the information comes from. It's what displays the information.
So is this, but like Facebook, but right now the database that Facebook's pulling from is other people who've added to the Facebook database. It's the database that Facebook owns, and so if you're in the Facebook app, you can see there. Is this similar to how AOL tried to be a closed environment and then they like opened up to the rest of the web or something? I'm not familiar at all with that paradigm, but is there any kind of parallel similarity to how AOL at first wanted to be like how Facebook's doing AR, and then they kind of had to open up things to kind of, I don't know, is that accurate at all, or is that?
Well, I mean, I think there certainly was a difficult period at AOL in 97 and 98 when we were transitioning away from the closed AOL to the more open, HTML-based AOL.
What was the difference?
Because AOL used to be based on templates, right? You had like 10 templates for where you could put the picture and the buttons.
Oh, okay.
And then,
people
would learn
websites based on these templates that only AOL could access?
Yeah. Wait, could only AOL when
when I started at AOL, there was no internet. There was nothing on the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's similar to now. So could you access? Is it similar? Like, could you access other websites from AOL, and could other people access the AOL websites that were those templates that were being created?
Yes
or was
and
it like...
no. Yes, if you were an AOL user, you always had some kind of a browser that you could use on the internet. But there was no way, if you were using a browser on the internet, for you to see inside of AOL.
Wow, so it's very similar to what's happening now with Facebook, where Facebook and Snapchat have these location-based AR things that are being added to the world. But if you go to the same point in physical in meatspace, you could see if you have to open the Facebook app or the Snapchat app to actually see. So how did it actually end up?
That's the way augmented reality is going to be for quite a while.
So how did it transition? How did AOL transition from that to the more open? Like, how did that actually happen?
Against its will.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Wait,
I mean, you start off by saying, "Oh, that's never going to happen," and then it starts to happen, and you're like, "Huh? Well, it's kind of happening. Maybe we should do more."
So is that the open source community?
And then of course you all shift to saying, "Oh, we knew it was inevitable."
Yeah, looking back, yeah.
Right, you have to sort of get yourself into corporate zeitgeist, right? Because everybody there is saying it at the same time.
Was that the open source
form of self-protection? What?
This the closed garden thing that is being described is exactly where the VR metaverse is right now. Like VR chat, you have to use the VR chat browser in order to see these worlds.
Same thing. If I wanted to go from here to high fidelity, I'd have to shut this app down, and I have to open up the high fidelity app.
It's like
there's
AOL.
no universal protocol.
Wow.
And also, let's not forget how much computing power and bandwidth we all need to be here.
Yeah, on hardware and yeah.
Oh, that's
definitely.
terrifying with net neutrality. And they're like, they always mention virtual reality as a reason to have fast lanes. And I'm like, shit, no, I want to stay. I want VR chat. I want to be able to access VR chat with my normal plan. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
You're like, in other words, you gotta like pay to have a better avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you
It's
see
kinda
all
like-
those low res people. You know they don't have any money.
It's kind of like one of Murphy's laws. It says that's a wonderful thing about standards. There are so many to choose from.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. That's good.
Yeah, that's true, Catapult. Oh my god.
But the way you describe the low res avatars thing, that's the way VR has been imagined for a very long time in fiction.
Yes.
So it's at least not completely unprecedented in our imagination.
That's right, but that's not no thought that I have, to be totally fair and honest with all of you, is original.
Well, that's the same for all of us, right?
All I do is talk to smart people all day, and I study this all day, and then I try and filter it out for all of you. But none of these are original thoughts.
You're a curator. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you.
So, okay, well, I'm going to probe then. I want to probe, and this is something we often ask, inspired by Nomono. I feel like you're always the one who's like really honing in on this, which is like, paint a picture, like, let's go into the future, like 20 years, 30 years into the future. Like, what do you see, like
100 years.
What is so, or 100 years. Did you say 100? Sorry, you broke up.
Yeah.
100 years. 100 years into the future. How are people using augmented reality? How has it become integrated that far into the future? Like, just speculate, like kind of like where do you think it's going?
Well, I think it ultimately supplants the cell phone as we know it. Right. I mean, you do have a handheld thing. It might be a keyboard or something, but that essentially will be your computer.
Not Neuralace or like implants or anything like that, like those kinds of things.
I'm not feeling the implants right now on a contact lens, the most advanced one. You can't even get a tweet on there. So I would just say that, okay, and also remember, right, in order for things to be projected in the air, unlike VR chat in real life, there needs to be a projection surface.
Yeah.
So if there's not a so in other words, a heads-up display works.
In your eyeball.
The heads-up display works because the data is being bounced off of glass.
But
right, the glass is the projection surface.
For projecting light directly into your eyes to simulate these things.
Yeah, that's technology. Yeah, that's called light field.
Okay.
That's what Magic Leap does.
Oh, I guess I don't even know that much about Magic Leap. But you don't think they are the ultimate potential for AR?
For head-worn displays, no, but I think that they're doing something exciting and revolutionary and worthy and important. I have no idea if it's going to work. It seems like they're very focused on games, which is the least interesting thing to me personally.
Okay. I see Dojo. Dojo's out. Has a question
hold on.
or comment?
We're not finished though. 100 years in the future, we've got something. Yeah. We don't have a phone, but we have some sort of visual something or another.
Right. So I mean, first of all, it's got to be as stylish as a pair of glasses and as light. It's got to have your. It's got to have your prescription. It's got to have your prescription.
Yeah.
Right, and it will be a contextually aware, head-worn computer / communicator. But here's the thing: it won't do. It won't show you information you don't need or want.
But it will determine what you need and want.
It will be voice and gesture controlled, so that you might say to it, you might order it to show you the data that's local, but you probably most of the time don't want it. When you get into a car, there won't be any dashboard. Everything will be projected into your field of view, right? So, I mean, it will. Anytime you read something, it will be in your field of view. There won't be paper.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
That's cool.
Ooh.
I mean, there won't be signs. The signs will all be seen in glasses. They won't be necessary.
Is everyone going to be able to afford this technology?
Oh no, there'll be some terribly poor people. and
So they
lots
won't have any
of
street
wealthy
signs.
ones.
They won't have any street signs. These poor people.
Nope.
Oh crap!
Wow.
Maybe they'll be
Wow.
holding signs.
Very
That'll be their
interesting.
job.
Oh no! That's what we'll deal with post
Wow.
scarcity.
Wow.
No,
That's
I do not think
interesting.
the benefits of the
That's
future do not appear to be evenly distributed, at least at first.
Yeah, it's becoming
that's probably
more. Yeah. Interesting.
All right, should we ask Dojo Mojo? What do you got for us?
If I could just say something about the idea of AR implants.
Sure.
It's a tempting idea, but I mean, you already see how often you have to upgrade things like smartphones and computers. So, at the very best, you would have to implant some kind of socket that you could slot technology into. But even as a socket or something, if you look at things like the research they do with pretty much making synthetic retinas and things like that to restore vision. Yeah, the interface they put in people's eyes as the technology increases ends up with so many more connection points, and it ends up better mapped that I don't think there aren't a lot of implants I think that will really have a long life for something that sophisticated as a neural implant.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I mean,
if
you get a USB port installed, next year it's USB 2.0, and you're out of luck.
Yeah, if you talk to an actual scientist about this, they just shake their head. I mean, it's just it's science that hasn't been invented yet.
I have a solution. I have a solution. Dongles. You can get dongles for anything.
There are a few things. There are a few things that work now, like cochlear implants. That's it's simply sound. But I think if you're talking about like high res displays straight to your optic nerve or something, it's going to be some kind of external device.
I also think that sound is generally given short shrift in the augmented reality discussion, but I think sound may play a bigger role than optics in the end.
If I could throw one more thing out on another note, though, there's an anime called Den-No Coil that had a really nice AR future vision where basically people had these lightweight, unintrusive AR spectacles. They just looked like normal glasses, but they were location aware and could sense gestures that the users made and things they said. Yeah, and people would keep AR pets or make a hand gesture to execute a command.
Yeah, I like it.
AR pets are one of the coolest things shown off in that anime. Like they show off this idea of giving AR glasses to kids at a certain age, and then they have them for the rest of their life. And then this idea of like giving them pets that they become attached to, that they can see when they have the glasses on. And everybody around them can see too.
That's cool.
Oh my god.
I like it.
It's cool. Oh my god, it's so terrifying because basically imagine just imagine the power of Facebook, except instead of essentially they are already in charge of our attachments because you get a notification that someone that is meaningful to you is talking to you and things like that. But just imagine the power of that, but there's like actually a pet.
Look,
I'm good. You are.
Yes, see, you can chill and sit.
That was so weird.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know.
I'm gonna bring up this again though. Like every piece of not every nowadays, but most content in Facebook is
move back to
user generated. Even if it's curated by the machine, like there's still an element of the human hive mind participating in that. It's not just a single entity telling you what to think. Like there's still human participation, and there's still we have a responsibility to share the content that we want to see in the world.
That's
an element of it.
That's the issue, is that there's this hypothesized like human hive mind democratic version of these kinds of things, but really like what you're seeing in your newsfeed is completely controlled by the algorithms that are developed by for-profit corporations. So it's like
it's not though, because maybe they decide what order they appear in, but they don't decide what the content is. The user posts it, and so they put it out there into the world for the algorithm to sort how it wants. And so like there's a human responsibility in that, and in addition there's also a human voice in that. It's not only the machine talking to us in that
that's
case.
true. That's a good point. Yeah Okay, well, we're heading towards the end here. So is there, and you've painted, I think it's a very interesting future that you've painted, especially with this idea of not having signs and paper and things like that. Like everything is kind of internally displayed, kind of, and there's a selection of the data. Is there anything else that you feel passionately about the augmented reality kind of future that you wanted to, I don't know, like mention or bring up, or anything like that? And also, any last thoughts about this whole kind of future reactions? I'd love to hear, how people are reacting to this kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Fear no
I
faith.
actually had a question. Does that
Yeah.
show a person of interest? Where they like use people's like, I don't know, facial recognition and stuff like that to like see if they're a danger to society? I think that'd be more of a thing, like help with police work and stuff like that in AR.
I mean, I doubt it, but who knows? I mean, now you're getting into like, that sort of minority report thing where you detect detect criminals before the crimes are committed.
Yes, yes. This is actually, so my brother works on this. He works on the civil rights and technology, and basically with policing, they have in different jurisdictions they have predictive policing, and they also have a threat level system where their body worn cameras that do facial recognition and then identify people with a threat level. But the issue, coming back to bias, is that the data that's being fed into that says that if you're African American, there's a much higher likelihood that you might commit a crime. So then they're biased, and then they act in a way that creates a confirmatory bias, which means that you're actually confirming. You act in a way that elicits the behavior that is negative. So like a police provoking someone to be negative towards them because they're approaching them unnecessarily, and then so it's like, I think it's a really good augmented reality kind of police. And Amazon, one last thing is that Amazon just, I don't know if people have seen this in the news, is that Amazon's whole Alexa database and everything has been used. They're marketing it now to police as like a facial
You're talking about
recognition.
Amazon Web Services recognition. Facial recognition. That's what we were talking about earlier.
With the police and
I think it's a small part of this broader pattern where like you can't be an impartial observer and not affect the thing you're observing. Like no matter what you look at and then get information about, it will change the way you in turn react. And so like you can't just be a completely passive observer.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I just got some lag.
Yeah, me too. Someone maybe loading in.
Okay, so So, Charlie, is there any other aspects you're excited about that you'd like to?
Let me just say this. First of all, please buy my book. It's on Amazon.
All right, cool.
Charlie Fink's Metaverse, an AR-enabled guide to VR and AR. And it's a surprise bestseller. We're into our second printing now. It'll be in Barnes and Noble. I think was sold out. I think they have just got resupplied.
What are we reading in this book? Is it a description of the way the metaverse
there's
is
over an hour of original animation in it, and it sort of is a survey really of AR and VR. The state of the art and the and the future of it, but it also includes chapters on China and VR, chapters on what our biggest companies are doing in VR and AR, what their corporate strategies are, as well as I think you would appreciate. I think you would appreciate the sociological perspective that it takes on what technology does to culture.
And someday this will be a history book, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was just saying that.
Very possible. I was worried that the book would be out of date. And in fact, the second page of the book is a big layout that says, "Warning, this book is out of date."
I love that.
So I was very worried. I'm very worried that it would be out of date. But here it's 6 months later, and what I've found is really it's just I left out so much. It wasn't that what's in there needs to be revised. But there's I've got another book full of material because this topic, both VR and AR, is extremely broad.
Yeah,
Yes,
for sure.
and also I just want to say for anyone like about this book is that like I have a copy of it, and it's not even it's less of a book, and I mean it is a book, but it also feels like a I in psychology in undergrad I had several textbooks, and one of them was the coolest one that I had in like human sexuality that felt like a big like magazine that had like a lot of really interesting stuff in it that you can kind of flip through and lots of pictures and things like that. So it's more, I mean, it's a book and it's really awesome, but it's very visually appealing and like kind of magazine-esque. I can't quite describe. I mean, it is. It's a new type of book that I've never even seen because it works with AR as well. So I don't know. It's a really cool.
Yeah, new
it
type
kind
of media
even
too.
yeah, even without the AR, it kind of draws you in, and you can flip through it, and there's pictures. And I gave one to my parents because I was like, "Oh, you guys don't know anything about AR and VR. Here's a perfect kind of like thing, summary of
That's
it." And
true.
I didn't even realize that there was an app that went with it. So I can't wait to have them try that.
Yeah.
So, but
we write about that in the book, so hopefully they picked up on it at some point.
True. Yeah, by reading it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
And...
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah,
it's been really
yeah.
fun to be in VR chat. Follow me on social media and keep in touch. Maybe we'll be back here at Charlie Fink on Twitter.
Okay.
Cool.
And the last thing we do is take a picture as well. So if everyone wants to come up on the stage, and we've already turned off the security. So if you guys want to come up and take a picture, you can Charlie, you can just stand right here at the front, and just stay right there, and we'll have our outro music and take a group picture.
All right.
No, Owlboy.
Yeah. Owlboy. Okay. Also, Ghost, you can get
your
on the
avatars are
as
so
well.
Cute. I don't know where you all got them, but they really rock.
I know, they're great. Oh, well, okay, no worries then, it's fine.
Oh well.
Paint the world with data. I don't know.
There you go.
Paint the world with data.
Let's paint the world with data.
On three.
Nice.
Paint the world with data. Yay. Nice. Yay.
Cool.
All right, thanks you guys. It was really nice meeting you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah.
I hope someday I have an avatar as neat as yours are. Yes, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the
stay
show.
in touch if you wanna hang out here.
Yeah.